Welcome to the Village of Mount Pleasant Plan Commission meeting for May 22nd, 2024. First on the agenda is roll call, please.
Meyer.
Here.
Washburn. Here. Rizzler. Here. Bosanowski. That's not you.
No, I'm
I'm
Van
sorry.
Beckham.
Van Beckham
Here.
and Driver.
Here. Right, next on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes for April 17th, 2024.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second. Motion and a second. Any comments for the questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next will be under new business, 4800 90th Street Site Plan Review, SP 2410. Sam?
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be confused with that other guy. It's okay, I've been called worse.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, on behalf of Microsoft, Wayne Thomas applied to update the approved site plan for MK 0304 phase of the Microsoft development. That is the area east of the tracks in Area 3. So it is bounded by 90th Street, Braun, the railroad tracks, and KR to the south. The updates to the plan qualify for administrative review. However, the adopted redevelopment plan for TID 5 requires the village board approve all building plans with areas 1, 2, and 3. This update includes minor parking, fencing, and landscaping changes. All the details of the previous staff executive summaries are largely the same, including its consistency with the comprehensive plan. We also kept the same fiscal impact analysis from the last 3A development on the west side of the tracks for this one. We continue to use the $1.4 billion worth of guaranteed value per the development agreement in our fiscal analyses for the total Microsoft project, which is what is reflected in your packet. Other than that, you can see the kind of summary of changes within the site plan. The vast majority of them are, relocated fencing, a few updates to parking in terms of like adding electric vehicle signage and other signage for their parking areas internal to the site, a little bit of gate and fencing and other type of striping, things like that through the parking areas. So relatively minor changes to the site plan. The village staff don't recommend any conditions for approval, and we recommend that you all recommend approval to the village board.
All right, thank you, Sam.
I'm not sure if I have any business even asking this, but new development value, 1.4 billion. Is that something that was negotiated and they're paying that on an ongoing basis without it even being at that level? Is that what we're talking about here? Or at what point do you go back and say, wait a minute, it's actually worth 1.7 billion?
2028 is when that kicks in.
Okay.
So we will, per development agreement, that is the negotiated minimum amount as of January 1st, 2028. We will continue to use that value. Obviously, they were at the big presidential event the other week talking about $3.3 billion, which got picked up in a lot of the paper and all of that. But until that turns into assessable value that's higher than that 1.4, we're just going to use the kind of conservative minimum amount, which seems a little bit silly saying conservative at $1.4 billion, but until that actually assessed value goes above, for our fiscal analyses for site plan, we'll use the minimum until then.
Okay, thanks.
That was a good question. Any other questions for Sam?
I really don't have any questions. I think that these are changes that, as they improve their site plan and QC it and make decisions now that they're there and on the ground. So I would be willing to make a motion if there's no other discussion. I would be willing to make a motion to approve, recommend to the board the site plan changes and review for 4800 90th Street, SP 24-10.
Second. Motion and a second. Any further questions or comments? Yes, Ron.
Mr. Chairman, no, I don't have any question, comment. I read the material and like Trustee Washman says, these are the changes I approve. I just want to have the opportunity to apologize. I was at Gateway Board meeting in Burlington and that meeting will never end. So I'm sorry,
He's
I'm
always
late.
bragging about those gateway board meetings.
No, because I'm late. I'm late. I'm apologizing.
It's okay.
The difference is he gets paid by the hour by those guys. That's what-
Does it? Okay.
I'll share my dollars with you, $0 with you. I'm sorry, but no, again, everything looks good. I read the whole material and, yeah,
Great,
sure, sorry.
glad to have you here.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay. If there's no further questions or comments, any public comment? Hearing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Perfect. And also, Nancy,
Yes, sir.
can you talk into your mic, please? IT can't hear you.
So, that's shocking, but that's okay. I'm happy to do that. Sorry, Dustin.
We're all shocked.
All right, next on the agenda, 6205 Durand Avenue Site Plan Review, SP 2411.
So soft-spoken, Nancy.
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Howdy. Feels like it's been forever since I've been up here. So this is 6205 Durand. Christopher Allen from KSW Construction applied on behalf of owners Son Ka Min, Trung, and Neo Pi Lai. Hopefully I'm okay on that one.
Sounds good.
Yep. It's construction new 2-story multi-use building at 6205 Durand Avenue. The building will have a restaurant, a pho restaurant, and a nail salon on the first floor. The second floor will have 6 apartments, including some ADA compliant units. I'm going to scroll down. This is consistent with the master plan. The master plan for this area is actually mixed commercial residential, so this is pretty much exactly what we have in mind. And this is in C2. Moving on. And the C2 district allows all 3 uses that are being talked about here, which is an upper story residential of 3+ units, restaurants, and commercial service all by right. And in the C2 district, the residential units have to be above street level. So they can be up above, but they can't be on the ground floor. So this property will be served by municipal sewer and water. To kind of give you an idea, it's right next to the Walgreens on the corner of Durand and 11. And there's like a gap where there's just a small house that's going to be demoed between that parking lot and then the sort of business office, multi-tenant office building that's right next door. And it will connect those parking lots together. A couple of minor tidbits. The applicant indicates the presence of a bicycle rack, but does not actually account the bicycle parking spaces. The ordinance requires 7 short-term and 3 long-term bicycle parking spaces. The sidewalk connections were the 90-420.70A require sidewalks or multi-use pathways along the sides of every lot that abuts a public street. WisDOT has the final authority on things on Durand Avenue, so they either have to get a letter from WisDOT or indicate sidewalks on the plans. The 90-420.70C requires that internal pedestrian circulation system connects the main building entrance to all sidewalks located along street frontage abutting the site. So the required connection must follow a direct route and not involve significant out-of-direction travel for system users. Other notes about parking, the stall lengths are 1 foot longer than required, and the aisle widths are 2 feet longer than required. We acknowledge that these might be needed to accommodate for emergency vehicles, that can affect the cost of the property. And the open access to, in case they have parking, concerns or whatever, they have open the parking lot on both sides, which is actually pretty cool. Do I have the clicker? Oh, okay, that's just the map. So one of the things is that the parking maximum applies to one of the uses, but parking maximum doesn't apply to the other 2. So they have quite a bit of parking on this lot, and if they were to have a parking arrangement with one of the other neighboring sites, that actually could work out well for them. Other things, the lighting, the plan did not provide specifications for the shielding, height, and color temperature of the lighting. There are small areas of the parking area under required 0.5 foot candles. So we need to have updated plans that show that. And then also we require trash enclosure screening detail, and we don't have that either. These are all fairly minor as far as these things go. The fiscal analysis is there present. It's actually kind of, I need to draw a special note to it, is that our target fiscal analysis value per acre is 1 million assessed value per acre. This is coming in at 2.3, and then so the assessable value per acre is 2.6 million per acre, which puts it in the top 5% of taxable value by acre in the village. To compare, the top value per acre is the Ascension Surgery Center right over here, which is about 6 million per acre. So this kind of, and this is a small project. So the 6 apartments conservatively estimated an assessed value of 175 each, and the 2 businesses on the bottom combined together to assess for 500,000 each, and that ends up to be a $2.2 million assessed building, and it's not much. The other kind of things about the metrics that are really great is that the revenue to cost ratio is 18:1, and the private to public is 46:1. 40:1 is net positive target, and obviously anything over 1:1 is net positive. The estimated years to repay municipal liabilities for the development, 1. And actually it's less than that because we don't pay, and that includes the cost of repaving that section of Durand Avenue, which we don't pay for. So it's less than 1. So this is why us planners and Sam and I always talk about infill development. It works, and you don't really have to break anything in order to make it work. So the conditions, so that covers my additional considerations. This is pretty much the first newly mixed-use building built in Mount Pleasant in quite some time, certainly since we redid the zoning code with commercial and residential on the same building. We definitely encourage that. So we had the conditions are listed in the end notes, and we recommend approval for 6205 Durand Avenue site plan review, subject to those conditions. Any questions?
Thanks. Tom?
Rob, just a couple questions for clarification dealing with, sidewalks or multi-use pathways. I mean, your notes indicate that our ordinance requires them along the side of a lot abutting a public street. But it reads sidewalks or multi-use pathways. Is it the village's discretion which of those it chooses to see there, or is it just a function of whatever ties into the existing?
Only if we have we would insist on one or the other if it was marketed on our bicycle and ped plan. Like, if there's, a bicycle pathway or some other kind of accommodation. Obviously, if something is started as one, then it should continue as another. But we like giving the option because there is different cost considerations and there's different amounts of space on each lot. So we feel that they're functionally the same. We don't want it to go back and forth between the two, and we would insist on that. But other than that, the option's theirs. In this case, it's really going to be on WisDOT, and they're probably going to say no. So
WisDOT will probably say no, as in nothing's required? Or they don't want to see anything?
Please don't build in our right of way is what they're probably going to say. I don't think, there's a sidewalk there? Okay. Oh, that's new since when they did all the construction on 11, right? Oh, okay. They redid 11, and then there's a lot more sidewalks there. So yes, you'll need to connect the sidewalk there then.
Because I would think the village would want to see maybe a sidewalk running from Walgreens out to Walmart if, if that can happen over time.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of desire passed along that side of the street anyway. And when 11 was resurfaced to the east of here, they put sidewalks in on both sides. And they also, the current plans for resurfacing 31 north of here to 20 is adding in sidewalks on both sides. So, yeah, they will be there and around. It's just that it's ultimately not our call. WisDOT has to say, yeah, go ahead.
But I thought the state was fairly encouraging as far as bike paths and walkways go.
That's not my experience.
Oh, that's not your experience.
No.
But as for this particular, putting a bike path or a sidewalk, if you're going to expand the road someday, ripping out a sidewalk is peanuts in terms of the cost of the project,
Agreed.
I would think.
Yeah, I mean, it's not nothing, but if it's not in WisDOT's like original like kind of estimates, then they want to put that cost on the locality if the locality wants something special, and that could easily be 7 figures very quickly, and most localities would be like, okay, you do what you want WisDOT, which is, put, bike accommodations into a large shoulder or something. So that's where we're at.
All right, thanks.
No problem. But thanks for letting me know about the sidewalks that do exist. So that is helpful. Okay.
Robin?
Yeah.
So as far as we know, so the DOT, I guess the question regarding the DOT, they are going to allow you to continue to use that curb cut that's there? You're going to have your own driveway? In other words, they're not forcing you to integrate between Walgreens and Mr. Leffler for internal access?
We are. We're connecting.
You're still going to do that?
Let's hold that until we can have him up.
There is.
Okay,
If
that's
you would
fine.
just a minute.
Yeah. Any more questions for me? I was actually commenting that that's a really good thing about the site is that it internally circulates to the Walgreens and the building next door, and it's something that I brought up as something that would be great from the jump when they talked about redeveloping this property.
Okay. Any other questions for Robin?
And this is gonna be right in, right out off of Durand?
It's too close otherwise.
Okay, at this point, if you could come up and give us your name and address, and we can address some questions to you. Sure. All right.
Jumping the gun again. Sorry.
Chris Allen, KSW Construction, 1319 Jennifer Street, Madison.
All right, thank you, Chris. Nancy?
So that was just wanting to make sure that you had reached out to the DOT. I know in those kinds of congested areas, they like to reduce curb cuts if they can, but they won't take one away. And the house had one, so apparently
Correct.
you've worked that out, and you know that's gonna work out for you. What is a faux restaurant? I sound really.
Vietnamese.
Oh, Vietnamese, okay, all right, thank you.
Pho?
What?
Pho.
Pho?
Oh,
Pho is French for face. Pho is Vietnamese.
Spelled P-H-O?
Yes.
Okay.
Something new.
there you go.
I don't appear to be, yeah, that sounds good. I love the building. I love the location. I think that is gonna start to set up that corner so nicely. And I would love to see this kind of building. Remember a while back, we had the North Shore Bank. There was a car wash that wanted to come in. This would be such an amazing type of building in that location as well. Easy against the neighbors, that's the problem along there is we have all these neighborhoods behind them, and it's difficult to come up with a good use that'll create a good building. I love the fact that it's a 2-story with the apartments upstairs and the ADA elevators there. The way you've set up the parking lots, to me, is really smart. You have the apartments and the restaurant help and staff accessing from one side, and then you have the entrance to the buildings on the other, to other businesses on the other. So I think that's very attractive, and
In
guess-
speaking with Walgreens next door too, with their regional director, there's 20 spaces behind there that never get used. So there would actually be an overflow behind there for the restaurant as well.
Yeah, I would think the restaurant would be the one that would cause that kind of parking. All right, well, thank you, that's all, I just had a minor question.
Any other questions for Chris?
I actually had a question, I'm trying to know if you established this, but I get the sense that with the development, are any of the apartments kind of spoken for as far as being?
I think they wanted to use one of them, one of the relatives that works for them is probably up there, but not that I'm aware of.
So I'm just saying that from a community perspective, having someone on site that manages the restaurants there all the time is actually beneficial.
I believe that somebody that works for the nail salon will be in one of the apartments. I know that, of one of the relatives. And as far as the items that you had mentioned, I just got them yesterday. I will send you digital copies. I don't have the civil aspects yet, like the bike racks, but I do have your dumpster enclosure details. I have some cut sheets for some wall packs that we're putting on and I'm waiting. We need to get our electrician in the contract. With that, I will have the light poles for you, and we'll send you updated drawings.
All right, any more questions for Chris? Yes.
And again, like Commissioner Trustee Nancy Washburn said, I like the plan, I love the plan, right location, right idea. My only very small question is, being the residential up, are there any concern that if the parking for the restaurant and the salon are full, people might drive around, to try to use the parking of the residents? Would they be concerned, or is that not concerned, or is that not feasible, or whatever?
I've met directly with both sides. Actually, it was just with Ray, the owner of the title company next door, before I came here, and he's looking at it as an asset to his business because people coming off Durand going west can only turn left into his, and by connecting the lots, people can go out the backside there,
Okay.
and even though it's only a one-way, behind the Walgreens, opening that up is gonna help a lot, and having the existing curb cut that we have that we're using, that's a secondary inlet going east on Durand. So, I mean, it's gonna be beneficial to all parties as far as traffic flow goes. I don't know that I answered your question,
No,
but
I was
I've
more
spoken
like
with both of them.
I was more thinking about the, people who will be living up here on the second floor. Would they be concerned that could be a time maybe at the peak hour that the people who are, or the customer who are trying to use the restaurant or the salon at the same time might improve their parking?
The assumption for the restaurant is that 70% of their business is going to be takeout.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, and then the entrance, the main entrance for the residents upstairs, although they have access at both ends, is in the back. The mailbox and the elevator and everything are in the back of the building. So they would be parking back there where we have the overflow into Walgreens and into the title company. So there should always be enough parking for everybody back there.
That's all. Thank you.
Now, you say you've got access to the Walgreens, but obviously they can restrict that, I would assume. But we've already done the parking study as far as they meet all the requirements on their property, correct?
They're
Okay,
I'm not sure, well,
okay.
And usually there's a written cross-access and parking agreement that's in writing and recorded against both properties, so it can't get changed.
But
unless
that's what I'm saying, do they have that? Again, that's what I'm asking.
I would think so, before they put this kind of money into the project.
Yeah, that's why I was over there meeting with Ray this morning, we were talking about, we're removing a bunch of trees that are along the property line and redoing some landscaping and elevations and such. And we were gonna have a written agreement with him once everything gets finished with the design on how we're tying it together. So there will be legal documents in order for all parties.
Same thing
You're
with
gonna bring
Walgreens.
that design back to these guys, though. If you're gonna be taking trees out, there's gonna have to be something there that has to be in the landscape plan.
We've indicated items in the landscape plan, I believe, in the revised, I have a revised, it was part of your notes that we have revisions forthcoming. I'm waiting for the civils back. I got the architecture end back yesterday, but that's all being addressed, and the neighbor is part of that because we're gonna have a agreed maintenance between the two parties.
Okay.
And that goes along with snow plowing and everything else too.
And just to kind of add, I don't think it behooves any of them to kind of not sign cross-access or just shut it down, given how kind of complicated traffic is right there. And also, none of them are directly competing businesses. They could all kind of get multi-stop customers a lot easier because of that. So, I think it works pretty well.
Don't we normally make that a condition, though, that they have cross-access? No?
There's no kind of enforcement mechanism that can say that we're gonna make you do this unless we had it, like that kind of access on a plan or something like that.
I mean, I would
It's
think,
good practice.
There's actually curb cut behind the Walgreens. Like you could tell when they did those two businesses, they planned on tying all that together originally because the curb actually turns and dead ends into the property right now, so.
DOT's responsibility to enforce that, since the state highway, not ours.
right, I was gonna say, for cross-access agreements, it's usually because one party has to cross over in order to get somewhere. In this case, it's kind of a voluntary thing. You have your own access, you have your own parking. It's simply an internal convenience for people to be able to go through Walgreens or Ambassador. And so therefore, I wouldn't think any extra agreements would be required in that regard.
Wouldn't you guys want to get a copy of the recorded agreement before you issue occupancy for the building?
Yeah, we don't really care.
I mean, it would be nice, but, we get the feeling that it's a good idea on all parties, so it's just gonna get done.
And
Well,
if
I
it's up
hope
to the
you're
DOT,
right.
Yeah.
then
I
it's a-
really hope you're right, because we had one in the village, when it was still a town, I guess, that they did it, and in fact, they built the driveway to the abutting property, except it's 3 feet in the air. I'm not gonna say which company it was, but, yeah. They did not live up to the spirit of the agreement.
There you go.
Chris, you are planning on putting a sidewalk in, correct?
Yeah,
That's
it's
the
in our plans, our revised plans to
Okay,
connect
thank you.
everything.
All right,
There's
any other
ADA ramps
questions
in
of
there,
Chris?
too.
Or of staff? If not, a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that plan commission approve the 6205 Durand Avenue site plan review SP 24-11, subject to the conditions for approval as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, I'll call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Good luck, Chris. Thank
Very
you.
nice, thank you.
All right, next is ordinance 10-2024, 4607 Lathrop Avenue zoning map amendment, ZMA 24-3. Sam.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the applicant applied to amend the zoning map for lots 2 and 3 of CSM 2314 from AG2 to RE. 4607 Lathrop Avenue contains an existing detached house, and the 2 other lots are currently vacant. The application follows the residential, including church's multifamily recommendation of the land use element of the comp plan. Neither the bicycle plan nor the parks and open space plan contain any recommendations for the subject property that were not already included within the actual land division documents, which you see in front of you. The village staff will review any site plans for compliance with these ordinances. The RE zoning district allows the uses described in Table 90-310-1, including single household per lot use by right. In terms of a fiscal impact, you can see the attached, it is a 4.7 to 1 total revenue to cost ratio, an 11.6 value for private to public ratio, and the public liability repayment estimate is 17 years. So just kind of goes to show, you know, these lots are along Lathrop Avenue, which is a collector cross-section. So with the current houses, it does okay on the fiscal impact analysis. If the houses are really big and really nice, they might improve, but we kind of use Coe's house as an estimate for the other two lots. So, you know, I would be cautious of going above that. Another good example compared to the last one, obviously this is a little bit more rural of an area, but the more intense development along a county trunk highway typically performs better from a fiscal side. That said, we don't recommend any conditions for approval, and we do recommend approval of the application. As an additional reminder, the zoning of these were a condition on the approval for the CSM. So we haven't approved the CSM that you see on your screen above until this zoning goes through. That's because they're currently ag. The minimum lot area is 20 acres, so they can't actually divide off the lots until they do it in conjunction with this map amendment to get it zoned properly. So other than that, it's pretty straightforward.
Go ahead. Nancy, go ahead.
So in regards to that last statement about the zoning, obviously it has to come first. So this will go to public hearing at the board then?
Yeah, in June, because next Monday is Memorial Day, so the June 10th village board meeting, we publicly noticed it for then.
So, okay, and as a follow-up to that, would it not be appropriate for them to still have the CSM on the agenda?
It's already approved by the village board.
So the
Conditioned on this successful
on the zoning, because we
Yep.
saw this already.
Yep.
Okay, so typically, they could run them kind of concurrently if they wanted, so that,
We typically encourage it. I think they just didn't realize that they had to do it together when they submitted the CSM. And
Oh.
there's like statutory review timelines on the land divisions.
Right.
So it got kicked forward, and then we did the conditional approval to remind them, hey, you need to do the zoning. So they submitted after the fact. We held the CSM with that condition. The clerk hasn't signed it yet. But when theoretically the board approves the ordinance amending the zoning map, we'll
Then
sign
we're
them
good to
both at
go.
the same time, and it'll go through.
all right, I just wanted to verify that it could have been run concurrently.
Yeah, we prefer it that way. We think it's a little bit clearer.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to. We can do the conditional approval, but for the exact reasons you said, that's typically what we would advise. And a good reminder that will remind future land devisors to do the same thing, so.
In fact, I think that was Tom's question on that CSM, or another similar situation where what was coming first, the horse or the cart or the, whatever.
Yeah, and the answer is really that they both have to come together, so.
All right, thank you, Sam. I have nothing else.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Looking for a motion?
Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve, recommend to the village board, the ordinance number 10-2024 for the property at 4607 Lathrop Avenue, the zoning map amendment ZMA-24-3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Well, before you start the next item, I just want to thank staff for putting in the spacer pages between the,
That is
Items
all
on the
Mr.
agenda.
Palm over there.
Oh, Robin.
just nice. Well, thank you, Robin. Good job.
All right, then moving along. Ordinance 11, 2024, Shiloh Drive and County Trunk KR zoning map amendment ZMA 24-4.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, the applicant applied to amend the zoning map for two parcels along KR from RH1 to and RE to P1 for natural resource preservation. The application follows the residential, including churches, multifamily recommendation of the land use element of the comp plan. The bike plan doesn't recommend any improvements for the properties, but the parks and open space plan does recommend preserving the property as open space lands via a nonprofit conservation organization. The P1 zoning district allows the uses described in Table 90-310-1, including natural resource preservation use by right. The village staff will review any site plans for compliance with those ordinances. However, we don't really expect any for this subject property. In terms of a fiscal impact, the preservation of the property via a nonprofit conservation organization would render the property tax exempt. The northern 13-acre parcel already has this designation. The village is not liable for any long-term maintenance of the natural area, but previously purchased a conservation easement on the northern portion of the property in coordination with Racine County to protect its natural state in perpetuity. This was the Campbell Woods purchase and land division documents that we went through about a year ago. We don't recommend any conditions for approval, and we recommend that the Plan Commission moves to recommend approval of the ordinance. What spurred this is Root Pike Wynn, if you remember, is the owner of the, I guess, seller of the conservation easement and the current owner of the property. They are actively going after grant funds for the southern portion of the property they have I think it's a 10-year option to purchase that southern portion of the property, and they're trying to go after grant funds to do it. One of the difficulties in grant funds that they found for land purchasing, which are a lot fewer than some of the other grant funds for active rehabilitation, is that they need to prove that the property is kind of protected from a zoning aspect. So we said we could help them out with this one. It's in our Parks and Open Space Plan. It was the intent of the village and the county spending all that money on it. So we said we would go through this effort with them to kind of get it right and do the cleanup. So that's kind of what's stemming this application.
Well, we hope that they are successful in their grant writing. We certainly want to encourage that.
Yeah.
So
I'll speak for Dave Giordano a little bit in that he was optimistic that they had a couple grants identified that they were hopeful they would be successful on with the help of this zoning action. So we're just trying to help them any way we can to get the rest of the property protected and the existing protected area in the proper zoning designation.
they've been out there working hard. I don't know if y'all get a chance to drive by. Obviously, I do all the time. And there's a new home that was built and is going to be a very, we approved it. It's going to be a very amazing house. But they've also been working in the woods, Root Pike Wynn, and you can see where they've taken out a lot of dead trees. They've been clearing area so that the undergrowth can come up. So it's really been kind of fun to see. They didn't waste any time in starting to take that and rehabilitate it, which it desperately needed. So
Yeah, they've been good partners. We're happy.
Yep.
That
they've lived
we're
up
always
to it.
happy to implement the Parks and Open Space Plan.
I've got a question, just so I understand the background and current status. The parcel to the north, which was acquired a while ago, and it's subject to a preservation or conservation easement as we speak. So when the village provided and the county provided grant money for the private conservation group to acquire title. So they own that piece, correct?
Correct.
But the village and the county required that a conservation easement be recorded against it.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And then, so with this planning or this amendment change, this ordinance, we're still going to leave our conservation easement in place on that northern parcel?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. This is just another layer of protection.
But we're not going to have the village will not have a conservation easement on the southern parcel because we're not granting money to it.
There's a temporary one on it now, but it expires in 10 years if they don't acquire the property, to my recollection. So there's kind of it's currently protected, but pending that closing of them. So that's why they're going after the grant funds.
So that limited term easement runs in favor of the village and the county to preserve the nature of the property.
Yep.
Okay, so if will that temporary one will just sunset and go away if things go as hoped? They'll get their grant on the southern parcel,
It'll get re-logged as a permanent easement in that case. It just kind of comes into full force if Root Pike Wynn takes title for the property.
okay, so the village somehow is gonna diary or calendar it to follow up and have that take place down the road. Okay, seems like we have quite a bit of protection between the zoning and an easement that it'll be preserved. So, good. Thank you.
So that doesn't leave that back lot landlocked at all then, does it? If it doesn't go through? Just to
Oh, no, there is a short access area off of Lincolnshire.
Okay.
Where there was planned at some point to be a future public road, but yeah.
Yep.
They
That's right.
can
That was
access.
going to be the emergency exit or entrance, right?
Exactly, so they can still access it off of that. It's still public right of way there.
Well, I guess one caution I would, it's, just maybe I'm imagining a problem, but often the neighbors start viewing as these private areas as their backyard and it's their park, and they get pretty proprietary once Wind Park starts allowing the public to come back in there. So I hope they remember that it's always meant to be public access and they don't get too possessive when the time comes to share.
We will certainly remind anyone who calls in between us and George that it is intended for public access. Right now, Rupike hasn't opened it up because they're going through the restoration process, which will likely take a few years at a minimum. But once in the long run, when trails are in there and things are open for public access, it is set aside for public access, and there is public parking along Lincolnshire as well. So as much as I don't think it's ever going to be hundreds of cars out there or anything, but you might get a few people parking out there to walk on some trails in the long run, 5-10 years from now.
If I read that correctly, the HOA from Campbell Woods is actually working with them to have them take over some of the outlots.
That is my understanding. We haven't been a part of those conversations. That's between Rupike and the HOA. We would certainly encourage more area that's protected as possible. And Rupike is a good long-term landowner, so we're happy to see that happen if it does.
Well, the landowners are more happy to see this than several things that have been proposed for this area, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much calmer rezoning hearing than the last one on the property.
Yes.
All right, any other questions for Sam or Robin?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 11, recommend approval to the board for ordinance number 11-2024 Shiloh Drive and County Trunk Highway KR zoning map amendment ZMA-24-4.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Now I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, ordinance 12-2024, amending Code of Ordinance, Chapter 58, Parks and Rec. George, welcome.
Afternoon. So since my hiring back in 2019, I've been doing a series of reviews of all of the park ordinances, evaluating what has taken place in my time here, what has been needed, and what needs to be clarified. So I utilized a significant amount of other municipalities' ordinances, sent it over for staff review through multiple departments, including clerk, legal, public works, PD. Everybody had a chance to review this document, and in front of you, you can see all the proposed changes. I want to go through and highlight a few. What you may notice is we went from 6 sections to 15. So you can see that we provided a significant amount more clarity for what is prohibited, what is allowed, and while keeping some of the existing ordinances, such as the conditions of allowing canines in the parks. The first thing is that we clarified our violations and penalties by adding in an actual enforcement, so we can actually apply some of the violations with the PD being able to issue tickets or violations within the parks. We clarified what is considered for our park property and what could happen with anybody who is violating things like with graffiti, staying overnight in our restrooms, not using them appropriately, removing anything from the parks. I've even in the past 5 years noticed that somebody had just planted their own tree in one of our parks. So this would also prevent somebody from doing something like that. We talked about sanitation, which was not addressed. Traffic is a little bit more clarified, just so that we understand what is allowed within the park, from parking to motor vehicles to bicycles. One of the major changes was the possession of alcoholic beverages. We are prohibiting alcoholic beverages unless permitted in the parks. which is currently not the case. We went through and clarified the definitions of what alcoholic beverages are allowed with different language there. And then we also addressed the picnic areas and use, which was one of the larger areas. What we consider a regulated park, what we issue permits for, what are just considered first come, first serve, what are shelters that we do not want people to be able to monopolize. And an example of that one would be the shelter that is in between the playground and the splash pad. We want that to be able to be used for public use. We don't want someone showing up at 7 a.m., putting all of their tablecloths down and occupying that from the public. So this would allow us the ability to enforce that should we choose. One thing I would want to note with that section, there was under availability, you can strike the first sentence. That was clearly a copy and paste issue. So it makes no sense where it says violate the regulations. It's referring to
Which
fire.
section are you in right now?
I am in section 58-11, recreation activities. It's letter C, picnic areas, and then number 2, availability. So that first sentence, it should start with just permits may be issued.
George, while you're at it, 58-3G doesn't read right to me. That's something is missing or not.
58 dash, which one? Sorry.
58-3G is in George,
Okay.
the last one, just doesn't read right.
I'll come back to that in one moment. Then getting down to the recreational activities, the picnic areas and use. So as we went through, we don't have anything to address the camping, what the duty of somebody who is in as the picnicker there. I mentioned that non-exclusive. And then a couple of other things that we want to not allow within the parks, such as golfing and other activities that we have seen from time to time. In the behavior section, one thing that I did notice from last week when it was submitted for your packet was we did not include the language regarding glass containers. So glass containers would follow under section 58-12 behavior. It would be letter I, and it would read the same way that it reads in the current ordinances. So I wanted to make sure that that was noted. Then we expanded our park operating policy to cover everything that is in effect by a permit. We want to be able to enforce permits in a more regulatory way, and this allows us to do so with all of the clarifications that we have put in, what their liability is, what the effect of it, how we go about issuing it, what is required by their end to actually receive a permit, and it also addresses the difference for a special event. And then I did talk with Lindsay and Tony regarding the fishing. So this addresses park properties, but also our stormwater detention ponds and what regulations would fall under for a fishing for like the pond over by my Park and Rec building or phase 4, Joe, is that what that's considered by Case High School?
Well, you got Smolenski Park too.
Oh, yes, and it's Smolenski, yep. So we just wanted to make sure that the village owns stormwater ponds that were also addressed, so we're taking advantage of these ordinance changes to implement that. So, village staff recommends the plan commission move to recommend approval of ordinance 12-2024 to the village board with the changes provided.
I do have a couple questions. One's in regards to the beer, because that was always allowed in the parks. And at what point and where was that ever discussed at the village board level to eliminate the ability to do that? Have we done that, or is that something that needs to be done in order to be able to put it in an ordinance?
Be part of this ordinance conversation.
Yeah, because you're going to have people that are going to, are going to go on a picnic, and inevitably they're going to have a beer with them. And I don't know how that's going to be enforced or whatever. I get the fact that you don't want to have a big party, but there are people that will carry a beer in if they're having a family gathering someplace in a park,
Or bike riding.
or bike riding. Not that I've carried a beer on my bike, I haven't done that yet.
Well, that's a flask.
So-
Beer will get cold, hot, but that.
I mean, they could do the same thing right now by going to their child softball game or sit at the playground.
Right.
I think it's easier for us to issue a permit for somebody when you say a picnic, that if they want to have alcohol at that, pay and get your alcohol permit. You know, that's,
Well, I'm talking about a family, I'm talking about, half a dozen people.
Right.
Gathering for a small picnic, that's what I'm talking, or as Davis mentioned, taking a bike ride and going, hey, we're gonna go out for a bike ride, but at some point, we're gonna stop and we're gonna have a malted beverage, if you will.
Stay hydrated.
An adult beverage.
Well, again, I know it used to be that you couldn't have hard alcohol, but it was always, beer was always allowed. And it's gonna be tough to police, I guess.
sure.
Okay.
Well, I agree. I think it would be very awkward unless these people have come in as an arbitrary small group. It's a nice Saturday, hey, let's take the kids to the park and we'll pack a picnic in a cooler. And the cops patrol through and they see this family having open alcohol. To me, that's kind of are the police really gonna wanna go after that? And do we really wanna go after that? I agree that I think that, I understand when you're renting the pavilion and you're having a party, and it's a graduation party, or a birthday party, or an anniversary party, and you're gonna have 20 to 100 people there, I think regulating that makes absolute sense, because then, if there's, typically in those parties, you have people of all ages, you wanna be able to manage underage drinking and so forth, but I think on a regular basis, if we've always allowed it, now we're gonna have people that, how are they even gonna know that they can't do that now? That sounds very restrictive to me.
I mean, why is it necessary? I guess that's for passive recreation. I don't see why it's necessary to allow alcohol within a park. We make changes frequently. I mean, every single board meeting, every plan commission, we change things from what was originally done. So this isn't out of the realm to look at things. I mean, we did not allow dogs previously. We did not allow any dogs on trails by ordinance. We came in and corrected that, and now we have things in place.
Well, yeah.
I think that this is something that can be regulated, and that's my recommendation.
Well, I don't think, Ram, as I remember, we haven't discussed this at the board.
No, we haven't, and I agree because,
We will Monday night,
again-
we will the next time we meet.
again, for one or two people or the friend, whether it's a bike rider or just go for a beer, and if the police is going to be, issuing you a ticket or this and that, they might say, forget it, I'm not going there anymore. I'm going to take some other route, and that's again, so I think there's a fine line where you want to restrict that it doesn't get out of control, like you're saying, is a big party. On the other hand, recreational, that's the culture, so.
Well, we're gonna take this up at the board, so I would think
Well,
under discussion.
only be, if we make a motion to approve, then the board would have to specifically call that out and say, we don't agree with, the non-alcoholic, ordinance.
You all you can recommend changes in your motion to recommend approval.
Right,
Or
to strike that.
take them or ignore them as they please.
I think that's the best way, to
Make the
Doesn't matter to
motion
me.
here.
make the
to
motion
Make the
to,
alteration,
yeah,
and then,
let the board vote for that.
Yeah.
Also, before we have the motion on, George, again, 58-3G, that's a typo, or it needs to be, I think it needs to be a small correction?
So that was an existing one that had not been changed before, so.
There's
If you-
something missing.
If you
in
read
there.
that, it doesn't make sense. I think what you want to say, the restriction imposed in section shall not apply, because it says shall not and any canine, so I think that and word is.
shall not apply to any canine assisted.
It could have been just a typo off the website too,
Yeah.
that it might have been adopted correctly.
I'm bringing it
so,
up because
yeah.
once you approve it, then the language would be approved
Yeah.
correctly.
Because I copy and pasted it directly from the municipal code.
I think what you want to say, shall not apply to any canine.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that's what Tom, you were
instead of
saying.
hand.
Well, it's probably,
I
you
got
know,
it called out
good
too
old
here, I got a little
word.
circle.
And, yeah, whether apply whatever you want.
Looking for that stuff, but I guess I need to.
Okay, and I do have one more yet. In regards to section 58-7, park property number 4, it says about constructing any type of a building or structure of whatever kind. You have these pop-up 10-by-10 tents that people will take out to watch a soccer game or whatever. Is that also going to be part of that? Because again, you know, they make, or those wind shelters that they build where you can, you're basically, it's a shelter, if you will.
No, yeah, that's a good point, but it does have special written permit issued here under. So if they wanted to have it as part of their picnic shelter, which happens a lot, we could include that as a condition under their picnic permit. Again, we don't want to get in, because of the nature of those things can blow over, and so that's why we want to be pretty strict on something like that. You know, they go through, they build the teepees in Smolenski and different things, so, yeah.
But I guess, having been a soccer dad, and anybody who's ever done that, when you go out to watch your kids, they play in the rain, and parents don't typically like to sit out in the rain, so they'll pop those 10-by-10s up.
That's
And the
becoming,
parents will be packed underneath them because they don't want to get wet.
Yeah.
more and more, I'm seeing that by.
And they go up easy, that's why I said.
Sure.
That's, and I think that would fit in that, but I don't know, because that would fall under your description.
Correct.
That's what I'm concerned about.
Okay.
Should it be added to so that it talks to, that there's an exception to temporary event, you know, I don't know how you
Sun or rain
would.
shade.
Pardon me?
Sun or rain shade.
Sun or rain shades.
Have it, maybe just weather protective, temporary protection from the weather solely for the duration of the event, something like that.
Yeah.
Then it would be
If
weather.
I can look into the language and rework it prior to the village board, because I think it's going to go to Cal first and then the village board, because you guys could table it at Cal, and if you, for further discussion, I think, right? Do I understand that, Sam? And have to come.
For a change this big, we'll probably take it to Cal, just to have it.
Well, yeah, well, and the fact that, you know, you have Campus Park, which is obviously a big, beautiful park, unfortunately, the trees are small, and people are gonna wanna have shelter out there if they're gonna be picnicking. So that could even happen on a regular day. Somebody comes out just for a picnic and they go, I wanna put a pop-up up.
Mm-hmm.
I would just recommend that you guys, depending on your recommendation, just add that as a note for the village board in your recommendation, to like direct staff to consider like
Yeah.
temporary shelter structures.
Okay.
Do we feel like this particular motion with, there's a lot of changes that we've talked about and a lot of corrections. Is anybody?
I haven't even started yet.
Oh,
Yeah, okay.
well, I'm just wondering if anybody's making a list, because this motion has the potential to have a lot of.
Well, so far I've heard,
on.
I just heard alcohol and then the shade structures. I only have 2 written down
Right.
for changes or questions.
unless now we're gonna get to Tom and,
Yeah, no,
go ahead, Tom.
I've got a few to go over on, just do them in order.
Sure.
I think the wording of section 58-3, clause A and B is awkward and should be changed. It says the village shall not permit a canine, blah, blah, blah. B says the village shall not permit a canine to do things. This should say no, but it doesn't say no person shall have their canine within 25 feet. So it's like,
So Tom, I don't know if this applies because this is existing. There's no recommended changes to any of this was already existing municipal code. So I don't know if we have to go something separate if we're going to make a change to
you
this.
should, well, if you should, you, from my perspective, you should, because this talks, this A and B restricts and tells the village what to do. It doesn't say, Tom, you can't walk your dog within 25 feet of a picnic shelter. It doesn't put any penalty on me for taking my canine within a fenced area. So it doesn't read the right way. It doesn't put, the onus is not, where everything else in this says, no person shall do this, no person shall do that. Here it talks about the village shall not do something. So I just think A and B, if what you want to do is stop me from walking my dog within 25 feet, this should say that. No person shall allow their dog within 25 feet of the following. No person shall allow their dog within a park facility. That's the way it should read. I mean, I understand, George, if it used to read that way, but I'm pointing out I think it should read differently.
What I was saying is, I don't
going
know
through-
if we can make that change because,
Sure you
is it,
can.
okay, that's what I wanted to make
If you're
sure.
going through this blue and the red stuff, you can certainly put more red stuff in this section and come back with some blue. Just because it's what's currently existing, that doesn't mean you can't change it.
You understand my,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, point.
I don't disagree. I just wasn't sure if we could make, because the executive summary did not address changing anything in 58-3, because that was left
Say that You
existing.
go right ahead and fix it. You know, otherwise you're gonna come back 2 months down the road and fix it again and put it on another agenda and whatnot.
My next comment would be, there's this lost and found article, and it puts the onus upon the Parks Department to go take all, to make every reasonable effort to find a lost article. Well, I would hate to be the person who gets a phone call saying, my wife's earring is lost somewhere on a soccer field. Go look for it, George, and keep looking till you find it.
Which section are you in?
Yeah.
Read funny, that's to me, I read that.
There's a lost and found. I'm sorry, I'll find it. Maybe you can find it quicker than me, George.
I'm trying to find where you're at.
This section is at all?
Which he's trying to, he wrote it down, he doesn't have the section number. He didn't have the section number, he just wrote it down as a note. Let's see, where was it? This is two, I forgot.
58-14,
Thanks, I apologize, everybody, for not.
item
finding that.
C.
I think it just says we would make every reasonable effort to find the articles. I don't,
Do you really want to agree to do that? It's okay to leave it in there if that is a policy that you want to do, but as a lawyer, I could argue every reasonable effort may mean quite a bit of onus on looking for something. And is it your job to look for something that I lost? I don't
Right.
mind, I don't mind you operating a lost and found if somebody finds something, they bring it to you and say, I found this.
sure.
I don't know whether as a policy matter you want to take on the job of having to go look for something.
I see.
And can you imagine a RASA activity or something with, hundreds of people and things get lost all the time.
Sure.
So I'm just pointing that out as a policy, whether you want to take on that onus or not.
Okay.
In other words, Tom, would it be appropriate to just simply end it with the finding of lost articles by park staff shall be reported to the Parks and Recreation Manager,
I would say-
period?
Yeah, period. That's what I'm
Something
thinking.
like that, yeah.
Just stop there.
I'm fine with that.
It's a thought.
And maybe we want to add something that says, they shall be held collectively at the village hall, or do you want to state where they're going to be located?
I would say just as you suggested, just stop at the manager, like Parks and Recreation Manager, and then it's a common sense. It's a common sense. Somebody find, they will report lost and found. I don't think we have to.
I would agree. I think that, I think hearing from an attorney on our commission that
Sure.
says, I'd have a tough time with this, I find that advice to be very important.
The next thing, George, would be, this is more of a larger issue. We talk about alcohol. We don't talk about drug use in the park. Now, maybe if drug use is illegal, this takes me to sort of my corollary point, is perhaps somewhere in here we should have a catch-all that illegal activities in the park, you can be banned. I don't know that it's flat out said. And I'm just thinking maybe a catch-all link that says among these specific things that you can't do, For instance, if you say something like under 58-6B, the police department may eject from the park any person acting in violation of this article or otherwise engaged in illegal activity, but maybe somewhere in here, have a hook to hang your hat on if somebody's doing something illegal but not violating the K-9 or the other things.
Yeah, I was just reviewing the that's kind of what I was thinking.
Okay, if it's in here, I didn't, again, it might,
Just I'm in under a regular village code, so I don't know if it's something we can reference to a different section, similar to how we've done with the enforcement penalties.
if you think an operation you're already covered, fine. I don't know what else exists, so I'm just
Sure.
raising this thought. The other thing I'm thinking, though, is down the road, there's certainly a material push on the part of some parties to make some marijuana use legal. So if marijuana ever becomes legal, you better amend this El Pronto to deal with marijuana use, or whatever's been legalized. You don't have to do it today, but
Right.
down the
Maybe a
road.
comment on that, Tom, Mr. Chairman, because recently I was in St. Louis, Missouri, and it was very interesting because in downtown there were areas where they had a sign, whereas the state of Missouri has made marijuana legal, by local ordinance it is still not allowed. So my point is, even if the even if the law changes, we can still say it's not allowed in our parks. It's still illegal. So I would not,
I just think it's a policy
I like your
matter.
thought, maybe drugs, illegal activities, but I would not go at this point in time, if marijuana become legal, you can still control that in your, by your ordinances. And I found that very interesting because there were signs almost every block saying whereas the state has made it legal, is still illegal here.
Then you'll run into the medical marijuana.
Yeah,
group
again.
that'll say, oh, I gotta take my medicine, so.
Well, that's the same thing we're talking about, stopping alcohol drinking. It's
Yeah.
the same thing, it's legal, but
Yeah.
we're saying, no, it's not in our parks. At least
Yeah.
that's what we're asking. Okay.
Let's just put that as a point to.
Yes.
No,
I noted it. Yeah.
One last question, because in the.
I don't, was Tom done, Joe? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Two more, and then I
Okay.
promise.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Joe.
This is, I don't, I apologize for bringing this up, but there's.
Oh, I don't
there's-
mind. This
there's
is what
no
it's here
dress-
for.
There's no dress code or decorum rules in here, so quite frankly, unless public nudity is otherwise illegal in the village, I could walk through the park au natural and not be.
It's good.
Oh, I
banned by
can't
this.
get that out of my
That
file.
is
Yeah.
way, okay.
So I will, it's somewhat related to what you're saying. Again, I went through several municipalities, municipal codes on what is allowed, what isn't. Use previous experience. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. That is why it was written the way that it is. If you don't see that in there, it's because no other municipalities address it, and it wasn't currently addressed. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but in all likelihood, it's covered somewhere else that we don't need to include it in the parks ordinances. So
You're
I don't know if
probably
I can't
right.
speak for the
You're
fact, but
probably
yeah.
right, it's illegal somewhere else, but I would just, if I were in your shoes, I probably would just double check that, so if it pops up, hey, no can do.
I mean, it could fall under the boisterousness. If you read that section, it could, any disorderly conduct or behavior tending to breach of a public space. I think if somebody was walking around in the nude, I think the police could use that as a
would think
back
so.
to kick them out or issue them a ticket. But that's the way I read it. So interpretation, right?
On a final Tom Van Beckham note, but on a more serious and more current note, the problem that's very current is protests taking place all around the country and staging of protests. I don't know whether our ordinances somewhere else regulate that and require permits and take care of it, or whether, as far as the parks go, you could be faced with, and this is not, facetious, you could be faced with somebody setting up a major protest in your park and declaring that they have the constitutional right to deal with it, and you have nothing here dealing with that.
So our special event application specifically has rallies on that, which would likely fall, or political events, or like, that is a section that is on the special event application, which does require, new applicants would require approval, bringing it back to, as we did with some of the other. So we may be covered on that. Again,
would bring that-
you're more educated from the legal aspect than I am.
I would
so.
walk through that with the attorneys and, the police, just to make sure the verbiage there is, again, enough to hang your hat on. Because if you're faced with one of these, it's going to be very quick, and it's going to be with some very forceful, adamant people who are going to be very insistent on doing what they want to do. And you need to have something serious to say you can do it or you can't do it, or if you can do it, here are the terms and conditions, you got to
Right.
get a permit. I think that's justifies the time given the current events. And we're coming up to, Republican National Convention in Milwaukee next month, or in July.
Sure.
So that's the end of my comments, so.
Yeah, I think
Those are all good ones.
if something like that were to happen, I do believe we have the protocols in place of them filling out the application and to have the right to a certain space if it happens to be on park land.
I just would recommend you walk through that hypothetical with the police and with the
Sure.
city village attorney. Okay, folks, let's walk through it, and what do we hang our hat on, and what will be our response, so everyone's on the same page if and when it happens. And I hope it doesn't, but
Yeah,
in these times, it might.
sure. Understood. Yes, Joe?
Okay, back to the canine and the 6-foot leash, and there's the 25-foot rule. In Campus Park, would that then disallow the dogs to walk through I'll call them the cemented, if you will, the cement trails through the middle of the park, or is it?
No, that would be, because we have that caveat in there about trails, the pavement would be considered, it would still be considered the pathways.
Okay, because it says 25 feet, and I don't know if that gets you in, when you
No,
go by the
because
ball.
I think we discussed this and we
Yeah.
added in that language for somebody who was, like, those trails are within the splash pad or like 10 feet away. You don't have to go out into the grass to
Okay.
you are allowed on designated pathways, and I think that's written correctly in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Right, yeah, okay.
there, yep. All right,
So-
anything else for George?
Yeah, so according to my notes, it's really the alcohol and then the erection of the structures were major changes. Everything else, I think, was pretty straightforward, or we had discussion on.
Well, I'd like to have a condition that 58-3A and B are reviewed and rewritten.
And
A and G, you said?
A and B.
A and B.
B.
and G.
And G.
And G.
G,
Yeah.
I think you lost some language there somewhere.
And again, I will double check that it might be written correctly, just not uploaded to the municipal code correctly.
Okay.
Like everything I pulled directly from, when you go to the website and you click on it, there is a chance that what we approved didn't transfer correctly onto the website. Does that make sense? Like
I would
what?
say- No, I would say that
So it could just be
Once the
literally,
motion-
we might not even have to make a formal change to that. It may have already existed and just has to be literally fixed, a typo on there.
Yeah, before you move it forward, you need to make sure of that, which, if it's a screw up, that's fine. If it's not, deal with it then that way.
Yep.
All right. Questions or comments further?
This is really obviously well thought out and a lot of work as we continue to move the parks along and grow these amazing parks. So we appreciate the effort you make and the research you do, George and Sam and Robin. So it's not easy and it's,
Comments,
Yeah.
Again, I will just point out that this is staff recommendations for all these, including the alcohol. Multiple departments have reviewed this. You can look at what other communities do as far as what they allow, for everything. We try to to make what works. I came from an organization that did not allow alcohol in any of the parks. We still had great programs. We still had great participation. It is a decision that it's not for me to make on that. This is just my recommendation.
Yeah, and again, I just don't know how you separate, a couple of guys, buddies who want to go sit and have a beer in the park versus, getting a permit for a group. And that's where I have the problem.
Yeah.
Well, that's why if it's prohibited, then it's either you have a permit or you don't.
Or you could remain silent on
Well,
the
Yeah, but-
lesser of the things, could you not?
I agree with Joe and everyone else. I mean, it's one thing to have a permit, but if you just want to have a beer, you don't want to have a permit. And you don't want to have a $5 beer and pay like $50 in a ticket. So that makes no sense.
Yeah.
So,
Well, or do you pull a permit that's like a yearly permit that says, I ride my bike all the time through the parks and I'm gonna bring and it's a beer permit for the summer or the.
I don't see why you couldn't
That's
just
taking it to an extreme.
No, I think
address
that's
getting a
taking
beer
it.
permit
I think-
and being silent on.
I think the easiest would be, in my opinion, under section 58-10, delete item 1 and maybe item 2, that's it. Leave item 3 because item 3 is about selling.
Right.
And then item 4 is the timing, not before 10, not after 10, because you don't want to be alcoholic. Just delete item 1 and 2 and then it takes care of that problem.
Why don't I suggest you run that by the attorney and just say, our intent here. How would you do this?
As I mentioned, I think it's black and white. I think it should be a prohibited activity in the parks. I don't think it's necessary to have passively recreate in our park. I don't think an alcoholic beverage is a necessary part of that. I understand if you want it to be and you have your public gathering, you allow everything then. Again, somebody they can just bring their 12-pack to a softball game. They can sit at the splash pad with an alcoholic beverage, making people uncomfortable. And I feel like if you prohibit it, we don't have those issues. So again, I'm trying to get ahead of that. If we have it regulated by a permit and they're out of control, we have everything laid out to enforce everything that happens with that. And again, just recommendation from operating the parks. And it's very common that alcohol is not permitted in the park. We have ways to allow it. It can be taken advantage of.
I think, George, I understand your comment as I think of the splash pool.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gonna be regulated, that's gonna be visited mostly by younger kids and their parents or babysitters or whatever. We are a public park that is owned and managed by a municipality. We are not a luxury hotel. We are not a resort where, people can go to the pool and they can take alcohol and they can take adult beverages and sit by the pool and watch their kids swim. They're paying for that as a hotel, they're paying for that environment as a hotel. I understand Joe's concerns very clearly, but I think it's those guys or those people that might take a bike ride and stop at the park to enjoy a beer. I don't think they're the nuisance. I think they can do that still. They won't get caught. You know what I mean? That's not what we're looking for. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to protect our other residents that are mostly families at family sporting events. My kids are in football. They play in intramural leagues that are at public parks in western Racine County, and no one brings alcohol. There's no alcohol there. If they're going to have a party or celebrate or have a drink, they're going to go to somebody's house for the end of the season party or something, and it's going to be at a private home. So I think it's could potentially be an interesting conversation at the board, depending on how the board might feel, but at this time, I'm gonna trust George. You know, we've talked about this the other day. We have a great deal of faith and trust and confidence in our staff and particularly our department heads, and he has researched this, he has 20 years of experience, and it's not allowed in most public parks. And so I'm gonna support it as written.
Well, I would like to make a comment. I don't think it's a question of trusting or not trusting. We trust our staff. I mean, everything they bring to us, we appreciate that. We have commended them from time to time, the due diligence and everything they do there. So it's not a question of trust, it's just a question of, I think what we are discussing is common sense thing. And maybe one way is, as I propose, or as I spoke loud, if we delete item 1 and 2, maybe one way is, you know, to George's point, you don't want to have, so you can put like, I'm gonna use that example that I saw in St. Louis. The state has legalized but not here. So you can put little sign in the splash pad or maybe where the kids hang around, designated area, no alcohol allowed. Everywhere else, if you want to have beer, if you're riding a bike, is okay, but you can restrict those areas. I'm saying is that it's not a question of trust, it's a question of how, using common sense, how far you want to go and put that in the writing and put the people in a position where they have a $5 beer and they might get a like $50 ticket.
Well,
Just one second, I had Sam just look it up. It's not allowed in Racine County Parks or City of Racine, just as a point of reference for,
That's why
not
City
that
of-
we have to follow whatever, but it is just our surrounding areas. We have county parks in Mount Pleasant that you are not allowed to bring alcohol in. You can go on Pike River Pathway when you intersect with the Racine County Trail. If you have it open, you have that beer. If you're just walking, as soon as you stop, you're in violation. Like, I mean, there is a consistency thing that I think we should also factor in with our other neighboring municipalities. But again, I had Sam I was gonna speak on that, but I wasn't 100% sure. He just did look it up.
Okay, I get.
the park in TID 6 is a Racine County park, so that'll be prohibited there as well. I thought it was when we talked about it the other day, it was, it is village, but I thought at some point it was in the regional plan or something, Sam? Comp plan, but I thought it was in the, okay, never mind, yeah.
Yeah, we can always come back.
I guess, again, I think we're making a lot out of it. I think if we want to have a discussion about it at the board, we can, and we can make recommendations there. I'm going to support that we leave that section.
And I guess listening to what's going on and understanding where George is coming from the standpoint of, somebody coming in to watch a softball game and bringing their 12-pack and flopping it on the, on the stands, the bleachers, and drinking all afternoon out there. I just look at it from a different perspective, I guess, and it's one of those things where, okay, now you're gonna have a lot of people I know you're gonna have a lot of people violating the law in both the county and the city.
Yeah.
I can tell you that right now. So it doesn't really, I guess, at that point, but they can control it by having it in the ordinance. And I guess that's probably the best way to do it, is leave it in the ordinance. And those of us who may want to have a beverage or happen upon it, you're taking a chance, because you can now be ticketed for that reason.
I've golfed at the county golf course, and, in my golf bag is a sleeve of beer.
Oh.
Because I don't want to pay $6 for the golf cart girl. So apparently I'm admitting on public record that I have violated the law, but it was beyond the statute of limitations, so.
Well, and again, before you guys take your vote or whatever, I just want to reiterate that I do appreciate the healthy discussion and the feedback. That's what I expected. So I felt pretty good that only a handful of sections were really discussed, considering how many significant changes have been made to this. So again, in the end, it's for the park users, and hopefully this simplifies things for everyone and clears up that gray area with our 12 prohibited activities listed in the previous ordinance, so, but yeah.
Like I said, my perspective, I would just soon leave the beer and that in as written, to prohibit it. And then the other one only thing that I had was in regards to sun shelters and things like that. 'Cause
Yeah.
you have a park that has no trees.
Yeah.
Virtually at this point.
You're right. I did not think of that aspect. And trust me, outside of when I'm working in recreation, in the evening and during the weekends, I'm probably recreating another 40 hours with my kids at various parks. So, yeah, it's very frequent. But thankfully at campus, we have a roof, at least for the kids, in the dugouts, so.
Okay, comment?
George, just one clarification point.
Yeah.
This package talks about bicycles and it talks about vehicles as being motor-powered. My thinking is then that electric scooters, e-bikes would be considered vehicles.
Separate regs.
Separate what?
There are separate regs for e-bikes and scooters. They have different classification.
Okay, but in terms of use in the park, e-bikes and scooters aren't.
It's handled in a separate portion of the code.
Okay, I'm just raising a question, George, just to think of, I mean, you probably have already. If you have, then tell me. Just that, as written, they would be considered vehicles, and they would be subject to the restrictions in here for vehicles as opposed to being used as bicycles.
No.
So I discussed this a few times with Sam because I wasn't sure myself. So do you want to come up and explain you much better than I can?
Davis riding his e-bike. and-
Generally, e-bikes are separate. And I'll re-review the other sections of the code, but in general, there's different classes of e-bikes, and they're a whole separate thing from like gas-powered vehicles. So that comes from the state statutes, Tom. So we can clarify it in here to make sure that it's crystal clear, but in general,
just
e-bikes are
pointing out-
not a motorized vehicle.
But as I'm pointing, for instance.
I understand what you're saying. You're saying you think they count in here. I'm telling you they don't, and we'll make that clear.
Yeah, just because vehicles are much more restricted in the parks Bible here as to where they can go and where they can park. Bicycles aren't much regulated other than, stay on the right side of the road. Do you need to address or clarify for parks purposes where e-bikes and scooters can and can't go? I'm just raising the question. I'm not telling you
And
it
there's
has to
state
change.
class limitations for e-bikes. Anyone who's bought one there's a mandatory sticker that has to go on your e-bike about what class it is and stuff, and that's generally addressed through PD ordinances, but we can refer to them in here to make sure it's clear.
But that provides definition of what is or isn't a scooter or an e-bike
And where they're allowed.
and where they're allowed.
Correct.
Just, all right, maybe it's dealt with, but at the very least, I would have a reference in your park department that says e-bikes and scooters are addressed and they are subject to the regulations set forth elsewhere. So at least there's some regulation in the park manual as to e-bikes and scooters, so you have a hook that hang your hat on when it comes time to deal with them, because I could see them possibly being a problem, that they're riding through crowds, they're riding through events, they're on the grass, and you may or may not want any of that. Just a thought.
Anything else?
No.
I don't think so.
Is there more?
So then I think you guys have a motion or?
Do we have a motion?
So is the motion,
What is-
is the motion,
What is the motion? The motion is, let me see here, real quick.
Amending the Code of Ordinances.
so I'll try this. I will be willing to make a motion to recommend approval to the Village Board of Ordinance number 12-2024, amending the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 58, Parks and Recreation, subject to, number one, George, the temporary pop-ups being added or addressed in section, did someone tell me what section that was, please?
58-7,
58-7.
7-4.
-7-4, And also for section 58-3, items A and B to be addressed in terms of who is not permitting with the canines. And item G in 58-3, correcting the wordsmithing there, shall apply to any canine.
Sit.
And
And 58-24, lost and found articles, that the
Yeah.
sentence be amended to remove the, every reasonable effort to find articles reported as lost.
And 58-24, as Commissioner Van Beckham just noted, removing that last sentence.
Okay, that's
Good
what my
job.
notes reflect. We have a motion and a second.
I have second.
I think.
No, Frank second.
Frank already,
Second,
Frank
okay.
seconded
I
already.
was about to ask in the motion, did you also cover that, George said 58-12, adding item I about glass container or whatever you said?
Oh,
About the glass
section I,
58,
but that
yeah.
I
Okay.
can add it, but
Yeah.
George had alluded to the fact that
Okay.
he
Okay, that's
acknowledged
cool.
that also.
When at the very beginning, I
I
included
just wanted
that.
to make sure that it's not missed anything.
Okay,
Very, very good though,
Yeah,
Ron.
thank you.
motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, George.
Thank you, guys.
We love our parks. We pay attention to our parks, I'm telling you right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
No staff reports. I just wanted to formally invite everyone. We are turning on the splash pad for the season at noon on Friday, and the Plan Commission is more than welcome to attend. The village board has already, been invited to just stop by as we, turn it on for the season. So bring your kids, bring your grandkids if you got them, and we're looking forward to and the sun, hopefully, and the weather.
And
Cross
your
your
bathing
fingers,
suit.
do a little dance, but. We'd love to see you out there just to, for a short event for us to, kind of unofficially turn on the park for the summer.
Are you wearing your
It won't be until
water attire clothing?
I will not. I'm not gonna lie.
today.
All right.
Quite for the,
Then nothing further? One last motion?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Now that we are adjourned,